So when I'm asked what are my favorite backgrounds, you're going to be surprised that, in fact, my favorite one will always kind of lean towards something white, a white wall, or a white backdrop. A white wall in a small studio space allows you to pretty much use the full width of the room, especially if you're shooting in groups. By leaning people actually onto the back of the wall and things, really, you dramatically extend your background. So if I was setting up a small studio space in a home, I would definitely keep one of the walls, if not all of the walls, in fact, pure white from edge to edge, avoiding things like radiators or kind of plug points and so on with it. As far as the floor is concerned, I think that kind of depends on the kind of style of photographer that you are anyway. For me, I suppose I like the kind of more simplistic Scandinavian kind of white walls and kind of laminated or wood floors and things, really. I think that always works well, like we're seeing on picture now. But as you can see here, even though this was in Studio One, it's basically a big white wall, and from there it really does allow us to kind of pose up very, very large groups, families, and give us that full extension again kind of thing with it. So if you look here, in fact, whereas we've got enough room for two of the tub chairs and a small sofa, in this group we're only actually using the one tub chair and the small sofa. So theoretically I've got enough room to add another chair to the right hand side, which means I can probably actually add in around about another 6 to 7 people at least around this group. What do I mean by that? At least one or two behind this young chap here. I could go for somebody else actually on the floor here and somebody in front of the sofa there. I could actually go for a small child here. So in fact, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've actually created 5 even before I've added in the tub chair. Add the other tub chair on the other side, and then all of a sudden you've got the person on the tub chair, 2 people behind them, 1 to the side. So we've added in at least that extra 5 people, I would say, within the group on the right hand side alone with it and things. So a white wall depends on whether we want to light the white wall or not. Because an unlit white wall, of course, is grey. So if we're looking to create a maximum amount of variety of photographs just using the white wall itself, I would definitely shoot some that it's lit with a white light, as you can see here, just coming in from the left-hand side. Just gives that little bit of a three-dimensional kind of pop off the background. We could always take this same image in the likes of Photoshop, select the white background and just increase its brightness a little bit as well to kind of almost fake that it's being lit. So with a light, without a light, of course, will give us that mid-tone grey like we're seeing behind the girls here, behind the dad and the mum. But also we could add some gel onto the actual light, and that will actually give us a little bit more kind of variety again. So a big white wall, favourite for space, favourite because it allows to kind of be quite clean. But again, I can get them to lean onto the background as well to actually create some real depth within the image and things, really. So you can see here in this image, in fact, this is an unlit white background, so you can see how kind of grey it is. And even though I've got a white paper backdrop just above his head here, ready to come down on the floor, in fact, I've covered the wood flooring up with a white vinyl, which kind of saves me from having to replace white paper on the floor quite a lot if I'm looking for a seamless white kind of high key setup and things, really. So again, thinking about how we're lighting it, the background technically is unlit. If we look up in the top right hand side here and just towards the bottom left hand side as well, but you can see from the arc of light coming through, this is from this little light on the floor that's kind of being directed back to the subject, and that's giving us a good curvature, but it is giving us some lit wall for 3-dimension. My next favourite kind of setup in background has to be cloth backgrounds. I like it because I've always felt that, you know, in small studio or portable studio spaces as well, I need to create big backdrops, especially when I'm photographing big groups of people, families, or kind of work colleagues and so on with it, whether it's commercial use or not. I mean, it has a Vanity Fair kind of feel as well, just being able to fix stuff. So I try and use one cloth to cover the floor, another cloth to cover the props, and then another cloth is the background. And don't worry if it doesn't kind of fully fill the background, because it's pretty much easy to fix nowadays with the likes of Photoshop without any trouble. So just selecting around the image, the girls and things here, and then basically inverting that selection, and then just doing a kind of a delete and fill will pretty much it'll do its job without any real work and things. So for me, the cloth background allows me to kind of drag props in from nowhere, whether it's a small stool, a suitcase, a filing cabinet, a chair. Often things don't all merge together. So using the likes of cloth is a quick way to do it. If you can't afford to buy a commercial backdrop, because they can be quite expensive, in the early days, in the late 80s, I basically went down to a material shop and I bought a whole load of calico, like an oatmeal cloth, which was unfinished in any way, and it was only available I think it was in 3-meter widths. And I literally took it to a seamstress who charged me like 50 quid to sew them together. I was lucky. I needed a backdrop specifically for a very big commercial group. And basically I couldn't buy one off the shelf no matter what. This is in the good old days before digital, so we couldn't really afford the digital any retouching, stripping in and so on with it. So I had to actually make sure I invested into it. Budgets were tight, so again, as I said, just going down to the material shop, getting it basically done, and then stitched together and working in very much a similar way. One for the big backdrop, coming down actually onto the floor. Then I had another one which was to actually cover the props and things. But the one that was stitched together did the background and the floor, in fact, in one. So I only had to have a separate pieces then to cover up the props. So cloth backgrounds, without a doubt, whether they're stretchy or whether they're kind of old master kind of thing, leaving all the kind of the wrinkles and shapes in it. It's really just down to your kind of taste. I don't mind the tie-dyed looks like you're seeing here, in fact. And I used them for many, many years, and I still do today. And in the background, there's just a background support, in fact, across the back here to give us the height. And then obviously it's just clipped to the top, as you can see with the clip. And then it's clipped out onto the right-hand side as well to actually stretch it. And then basically, as I said, I just fix it in digital then. So cloth backgrounds, without a doubt, number one. In my opinion, and in the days of digital, very, very easy now to fix in almost a 2 or a 3 click wonder with it. Paper, I think paper is great when you've got space to store and you're using it often. One of the negatives to do with paper is as soon as it gets damp, it crinkles almost instantly, especially when it's up on the likes of a scaffolding pole or the likes of, it kind of loses its little bit of shape through the cardboard core, and then it starts to actually take on more and more of the moisture, and it starts to kind of really give us a kind of a pattern in the background that can look like a cloud effect and things, really. But when you work in and storing in quite a dry area, and you can store these in a vertical position, that's the big tip in paper. Not only do you save space, but you save the warping. But I really do like paper. This is a kind of a concept that we were playing around with 3 colours, one for the floor, one for the backdrop, and obviously another side wall, creating a very small-sided, small studio space, but one that could be changed instead of painted over all the time. And again, as far as the paper is concerned, the only negative, it's wrinkling, and if you're having to set up a background on location, especially when you're using the 3-meter plus ones, it's transportation of that paper and minimizing the damage. In the world of commercial photography, you tend to actually commission the paper for the job, and then if you've got no use for that particular one, again, it's going to go into store, or more often than not, in fact, we used to kind of donate them to the local schools. The nursery schools absolutely love them for colouring, painting, crafting and everything else with it and things, really. So as far as the coloured backdrop's concerned, I would start off with the likes of a grey. and I'm a big fan of teal. But I also like the oatmeal. So if I was going more of a fine art kind of look, I definitely want a white wall, as I've already said. If I couldn't have a white wall in my studio, I'd definitely have white paper. I would go for the likes of an oatmeal or a dark oatmeal or a light brown as a background for the fine art kind of level. That tends to actually work in a good color palette. With the likes of skin tones and clothing and so on with it. But the more dramatic colours give more dramatic images as well. The other one I like are the kind of the old master backdrops, ones that are specifically either a pop-up or they're more of an event. Now this is an event one, so it's probably takes me about 5-10 minutes tops to actually put together. It's on metal frames. It's fully wrinkle free, so because it's stretched. And this is a great one when we're doing big groups on location, and where we want to minimize the actual amount of the post-production work, so we can go pretty much straight to print or straight out to the commercial client. But I'm also a big fan of the kind of the little pop-up ones, because more often than not, you're going to be photographing individuals or couples. Probably most of you are going to photograph 3 people as a maximum the majority of the time. So if you could keep to that, you'll basically be able to create yourself some mini studios with multi-sides, a bit like we're seeing here. In fact, there's a white pop-up background just to the left-hand side of the photograph, and obviously we've got this pop-up, and we could even have a coloured background behind me. But it allows us to kind of really work. Other backgrounds, if you're in a permanent studio space and you're using the likes of reflector flats, polystyrene, polyboard, then basically I usually paint one side black and have the other side either grey or white. You usually have about between 2 and 6 kind of polyboards in a commercial studio anyway, at least. So we pretty much have black on one side and grey on another, and then a series of black and whites as well. But they can be used, as you can see here, to pretend to lean on. And yes, you can see all the kind of scuff marks and so on, but it adds to some of the overall effect with the image no matter what. There's other backgrounds that I like. This is a flower wall that we bought from a warehouse kind of that sells to floristry. You're looking at a background that is stitched together, as far as not in Photoshop, but it's actually tied together on kind of plastic frames and things, really. And I would say that if you're going to have a dramatic backdrop, look for something that will either be used on a series of portraits or in a certain promotion. But just don't buy it for one thing. Commercial photography is slightly different to portrait photography. As a portrait photographer, we need to actually maximize the background often usage, in other words, whereas a commercial background is tending to actually be either white, grey, very rarely is it black, or it's going to be a specialized kind of background and things, really. So as far as the kind of the background choice is concerned, I do like the old master. It allows us to illuminate it, to allow separation. So when we use different backgrounds, we mustn't forget at times, if we give some illumination to the background, you get a 3-dimensional effect. And even before we add the light onto the subject, we're getting a quality of light. And obviously, if you're using the likes of a grey background and you have enough flash power, you can even overpower that that grey background to become near white and things, really. So just think about what you're trying to achieve. But I would definitely go for a white background. I would go for a coloured paper without any doubt. But I suppose if you're investing into one thing, I would say go for a very big cloth background. And if you can afford it and you like the colour, I would definitely invest into 2. One for the backdrop and one for the floor and to cover the props.